There are proclamations being made today that the Iraqi city of Fallujah is closer to being completely liberated, that ISIS is losing its grip and closer to being chased out. But all this comes as the fighting continues, and there remains plenty of doubt that the American-supported government there can reclaim that nation. The news is another sober reminder to those who fight in that country, those who did fight there, and those who worried about how fragile any peace would be, and greater evidence to many that the American lives lost in any war involving that country were all in vain. The Iraqi city of Ramadi is another sore spot, supposedly free, but at this very moment still under siege from terrorists and anything but actually restored. Recently, we spoke with Colonel Tony Deane, retired from the U.S. Army, author of the new book, Ramadi Declassified, a roadmap to peace in the most dangerous city in Iraq, for his thoughts on why we just cannot seem to get the job done in that country. The fascinating and detailed book is called Ramadi Declassified, a roadmap to peace in the most dangerous city in Iraq. The author is a decorated veteran of the Cold War, Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm, Operation Joint Guardian in Kosovo, and Operation Iraqi Freedom. Welcome retired U.S. Army Colonel Tony Deane to the Hardline. Colonel, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
This is specifically about Ramadi, so let's focus there. What was it that made Ramadi so absolutely critical to the overall effort?
Well, when we arrived in May of 2006, Al-Qaeda controlled the entire city. The government was in shambles, the police force, there was less than 200 policemen in a city of 400,000, IEDs. The population was completely under the control of Al-Qaeda. There were U.S. forces were there, but they held the kind of the outskirts of town, and we were pretty much in a stalemate. And that was the first time really that the American forces changed tactics of pushing out in these small combat outposts and getting out in the community. And that built trust with the community. The other kind of key thing that happened for us was Sheikh Sattar Abarishu and his brother Sheikh Ahmad Abarishu, who were always very friendly with the coalition. We made an agreement with them to help us recruit Iraqi policemen. And over the course of the summer, we recruited about 300 men to join the police, not tribal fighters, not under a warlord, but they were part of the government. And the tide turned. A lot of tough fighting on the part of the American forces because the Iraqi forces weren't ready at the time. But once between our hard fighting and then once the police came on board in September 2006, most dangerous city in the world, Islamic Caliphate. A year later, they ran a 5K race with tennis shoes down Route Michigan, which was the most dangerous route in Iraq at the time.
Were we ready at that moment when you hit the ground with your troops? You talk about changing tactics and things that we had learned, but were we completely prepared for what we were facing?
I don't think I was. I had been to Ramadi a few months earlier, and oddly enough, my unit was held in Kuwait for 6 months. As part of what was called the call forward force, because we were in this hurry to get out of there. We were starting to draw down. Things were looking good, and that was the message. So we were held in Kuwait for 6 months, and I actually had a chance to visit Ramadi, and it was eye-opening for me. But I think the other part, though, where we were ready was we had great leaders from the brigade commander, Colonel Sean McFarland, who's now the head leading the fight in Iraq, down to my squad leaders and team leaders down in my Bravo company, infantry company, and they were very adaptive, and everybody kind of came together, and it was just a matter of figuring out what worked and what didn't work, and we'd go back to the drawing board every time something happened.
I talk about learning from history, and whenever I talk about military strategy and what goes on around the world, that's one of the big things that I always like to push forward, having a military background with my family being in the military. As we look at it now, you fought Al-Qaeda in 2006. We now have IS forces, Daesh, whatever you want to call them, that are still in Ramadi, that are making it difficult for people to live as they try to get back. It still is a city that is not totally free. How upsetting, how distressing is that to you after all the work you put in?
Well, it is quite upsetting on a lot of levels, but I don't think our work was in vain because we showed what was possible. And the IS guys, Daesh, whatever you call them, al-Baghdadi was one of al-Zawahiri's lieutenants, the guy who was beheading everyone back in 2006. And so They say, oh, they're not Al Qaeda. I mean, that's a distinction without a difference. I mean, they're the same.
Say that again.
Group.
It's the same group of people.
It's the same group of people. It is the same group. They were all, not to go too far inside of baseball, they were all Tweed al-Jihad. And so these group, and some of them are religious fanatics, some of them are criminals. Now, my understanding from what I read in the papers is these former Baathists have thrown in with them as well, mainly because the government in Baghdad has...
they all wallow in the same sewer.
Yeah, they do now, because the Sunnis were actually, once we pulled out in 2011, the Maliki's government turned back to its sectarian ways and, purged the Sunnis out of the government, purged the Sunnis out of the military, and sent the army into Anbar.
As we talk about going forward, I got about 30, 40 seconds left. In your estimation, what do we need to learn? What must we learn from what you went through and those brave soldiers did to make sure that things like this don't happen again?
I think that we really need to think about what it's going to take to win there, and it's a long-term commitment. Germany, Japan, Italy, we tried to do it on the cheap, but we say we don't want to open-ended commitment in Iraq. We've been there for 25 years since Desert Storm.
Are we ready for that as an American public?
I think it takes our political leaders to tell the truth about what's needed to make that part of the world safe. Otherwise, we're looking at a civil war that's, it's 500,000 in Syria. How many are we going to sit on the sidelines for? People dying. You
realize, of course, how difficult that is, and every time with good military men like yourselves, it always comes down to the politicians telling the truth. That's always the most difficult thing. I want to remind everybody once again, the book is called Ramadi Declassified, A Roadmap to Peace in the Most Dangerous City in Iraq. It is brave men like Colonel Tony Deane and those people who help to win the peace all the time. Thank you for your service, Colonel, and thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me on.
Pleasure. To tell you something, I'm very proud of the fact that we here on this show spend a tremendous amount of time talking about the veterans. We talk about the veterans' needs. We talk about the veterans' issues. We talk about the news about it. And we actually do discuss with the military veterans who were there. I take pride in the fact that this show does it more than any other program on this network. And we do it to talk about the fact that our veterans need our help. They need our support. And we should be behind them and know what goes on and how it is happening overseas right now. It affects us all. I want to remind, first of all, though, tell you this, that since 2008, an organization called Troopathon has raised over $4.5 million in sponsorships, 333 tons of care packages that are sent to our troops stationed overseas. We here at Newsmax are just as proud to have this event. The annual Troopathon will be held right here on Newsmax TV. We carry the event in its entirety from 4 o'clock to 10 o'clock Eastern Time tomorrow, commercial free. That's Thursday, June 23rd. It's in Sacramento, California. Our own John Bachman is there. He will help anchor the coverage. We're talking about movie stars, athletes, musicians, radio, TV personalities. They will all be there. Make sure you join us tomorrow, 4 to 10 o'clock Eastern Time. Quick programming note, too. As of June 1st, Newsmax discontinued on Dish. You can't see us if you subscribe. Newsmax TV did not charge Dish to carry the network. We financially benefit them. We're disappointed. If you have a friend or a family member subscribing to Dish, go to their customer service. This election is simply too important. Call them at 1-800-700-4376 right now. Tell them you want Newsmax TV back on the Dish network as we head towards the conventions and the election. You need the voice that we provide here every single day. And of course, your voices as well. When we ask for it, you deliver. Rock on, true believers. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you on Friday then. Good night and good luck.